learning to think from the end rather than about the end. People say, well, you're so productive, you get so much done, you've written so many books, you've done so many CDs, you've done all these PBS shows, you've done movies, you've done... And you know what? I basically think I screw off a lot. I don't really think I do that much at all. I mean, you can't even imagine. I mean, I take time to exercise 3.5 to 4 hours every single day of my life. Every day. My kids will tell you. I swim in the ocean every day. I do yoga for 90 minutes almost every single day of the week. I walk at minimum an hour and a half every day of power walking on top of all of the other things. It's hard for me to imagine myself not doing, because my imagination is so strong and such a part of what it is that is my life, that how it manifests isn't nearly as significant as that I keep my imagination sharp and focused. And I want to read you a little bit of Neville. It's a book, Moving from Desire to Wishes Fulfilled, by Neville. The great secret is a controlled imagination and a well-sustained attention firmly and repeatedly focused on the object to be accomplished. It cannot be emphasized too much that by creating an ideal within your mental sphere, by assuming that you are already that ideal, you identify yourself with it and thereby transform yourself into its image. Thinking from the ideal instead of thinking of the ideal. Thinking from the ideal instead of thinking of the ideal. Every state is already there as mere possibilities, as long as we think of them, but as overpoweringly real when we think from them. This was called by the ancient teachers subjection to the will of God, or resting in the Lord. And the only true test of resting in the Lord is that all who do rest are inevitably transformed into the image of that in which they rest. You become according to your resigned will, and your resigned will is your concept of yourself and all that you consent to and accept as true. You, assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled and continuing therein, take upon yourself the results of that state. Not assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are ever free of the results. The truth that sets you free is that you can experience in imagination what you desire to experience in reality, and by maintaining this experience in imagination, your desire will and must become an actuality. Again, the truth that sets you free is that you can experience in your imagination what you desire to experience in reality. And by maintaining this experience in imagination, your desire will become an actuality. Now, all I can say to you about that is that it really works. The first part of this is the power of your imagination. The second part of what I'm speaking about here is thinking from the end. The third concept, after thinking from the end, is these words. If you're taking notes, I want you to really have them underlined. These are the words that Neville has spoken that really resonated with me. He said, you must learn to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Whatever it is that you have in your imagination, this is the only tool that you have for bringing it into reality, for hardening it from a thought to perhaps first an image, and then a condition, and then an event, and then an object. That your imagination is the only place that you can make all of this happen. If it's the weight that you want to lose, if it's the addiction that you want to overcome, if it's the relationship you'd like to fix, whatever it is you'd like to create, he gives some very specific examples of how this can work. Assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled means that in your imagination, You have created what it is, what you have imagined for yourself. You think now from that end rather than about that end. And now you assume the feeling of that wish being fulfilled. And where do you experience feelings? In your body. That's what the body is. It's the reservoir of feelings. They show up in your flushing. They show up when you get embarrassed. They show up when you get joyful. They show up when you get sad. You know, you have physical manifestations of feelings. You assume the feeling of this wish being fulfilled. So what does it feel like within you to have this thing materialize? He makes a big case for creation itself, that you have really no control over the details. And you don't get to be a part of creation, he says, because creation is already complete. What you get to decide is what aspect of creation is going to manifest or materialize or show up into your life. That's what you get to do. You don't get to go out there and make mosquitoes or create flowers and all. All of that is being done by the great invisible Tao. What you get to decide is what extent of what is already being created and is part of creation that you are participating in, what share of it is going to manifest and be a part of your life. And you do this through the assumption of a feeling of a wish fulfilled, so that you imagine what it is that you would like to have or to be or to manifest, and you imagine this for yourself, and then what you do is you feel it in your body. And you ask yourself, what does it feel like? You almost have to think of yourself as having a cord that extends from your hip. And this cord can be plugged into one of two sockets. If you plug the cord into the socket of the material world, the physical world, at 20,000 cycles per second, you're going to get what the physical 20,000 cycles per second world has to offer. You're going to get problems, you're going to get fears, you're going to get worries, you're going to get illnesses, you're going to get accidents, you're going to get victimization. These are the things that happen when you plug into the material, slow, solid frequencies. If, on the other hand, you decide to take your plug and your cord and plug it into God, and it's really an internal metaphor that you can use at any time in your life, that I can unplug myself from here, because when I'm plugged into here in 20,000 cycles per second, I am feeling anxious, and I am worried, and my stomach is upset, and I feel sick, and I can't eat, and I want to take pills, and I want to go to the doctor, and I want somebody else to cure it for me. Those are the reactions to plugging in here. But when you plug into God, in your mind, when you just take this plug and you plug it in over here, you say, all right, God, I'm plugging into you, and I'm turning it over to you. Because I don't know how to handle this. But I know you do. Because you keep the planets in alignment. And you make the flowers bloom. And you turn a seed into a flower and an embryo into a baby. And I can trust an intelligence that can make miracles like that happen. And I know you have the answer. It's not like I have to say, oh, dear God, oh, my God. You know, I know that you can create the world, and I know you can do all of those things, but if you only knew my problems, you couldn't possibly solve them. And God is up there saying, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, it's not too bad to make a universe and to turn an embryo into a baby. But with the parents you had, my hands are tied. I'm sorry, there's just not much that I can do. I'm really sorry, you know. You have to really be willing to surrender and turn it over. And ask. And ask. And then create an intention. And then I think it's most important of all, after you turn it over, to remember that it's never between you and them when you have a conflict in your life. And I had read something from Mother Teresa called The Final Analysis. And let this ring in your hearts if you're looking for what to do to reach the highest levels of consciousness. Let this fill your hearts tonight. From Mother Teresa. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone may destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you have anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it's all between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And it was never between you and anyone you're in conflict with. Whoever they are, no matter how severe the conflict, it's always between you and God. Anyway. You can applaud because that's from Mother Teresa.
You just need to do. That's the key word, to do. Even trying is a myth. Without being nitpicking, you can't try anything. If I say to you, there's this pen sitting on this table in front of us, and I say to you, all right, what I want you to do is try to pick up this pen. Now, here we go, okay? Now, in reality, all of this trying is called not picking up the pen. It's just not up yet. And then when I do this and I pick it up, there's the pen up in the air. The trying is man's invention. It's the doing. It's the doing that is important. And yes, risk-taking is phenomenal. And I use the word myself. I have in a chapter in my book on raising children called I Want Them to Become Risk-Takers. And yet I don't believe it's risky at all. I believe the risk is only our evaluation of it. And that the real risk, other than putting your life in jeopardy and jumping in front of a moving train and foolish things like that, which I'm not talking about here, the risk is, there's several. One is that I will fail. All right, let's look at that. You can't succeed unless you're willing to fail. And you can't always be better than everybody else, because if you're a winner by having to defeat everybody else, then you'll always be a loser, because no one can always defeat everybody else, no matter how great they are. So that's not a good definition of winning at all. I've often talked about Babe Ruth hitting 60 home runs in 1927, the year he struck out more than anybody in the history of baseball, the same year. If you want to hit home runs, you have to be willing to strike out. And failing at something is just an opportunity, if you're looking at it the way I'm talking about. It's just an opportunity to see where you are and to assess who you are. And if you're having to look over your shoulder at somebody else to decide how you're doing, then somebody else's performance is determining who you are and how well you're doing. That's called competition. Enlightened people don't look at other people to determine where they are. They say that's the person and that's how they're running and that's where they are in their music development or whatever it is. And that has nothing to do with me. Where I am is how I decide to believe. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting out there and competing in a tennis match or in a golf match or in bowling or in anything in life. But to understand that it's not to evaluate who you are and how valuable you are, but just to see how you stack up to somebody else. That's fine. And when it's over, it's over. That's one big risk. And when you get to a point where failure is something you welcome, because that's how you learn. You don't learn much from success except to stay the same. But when you fail at something, it's a wonderful experience because it gives you an opportunity to grow. To me, that's not risky at all, even though to many people it is, this whole business of failing. The other fear is that I won't be liked, or that somebody won't approve of me. Well, the enlightened people are independent of the good opinion of other people. They are not functioning and running their life based on what others think or say or tell them to do, but instead on what my own inner lights tell me to do, with the morality of as long as I'm not hurting anybody else or interfering with anyone else's right to run their life as they choose, then anything that I do is okay. That's all morality is. Your right to swing your fist and flail around stops with my right to have my nose shaped the way I want it to be shaped. That's it. And so that's the only morality there is. And so you go out into the world and you are who you choose to be. And you know that some people will like it and some people won't. And the people who love you the most will probably dislike what you do the most, 50% of the time. And if you're trying to run your life based on what everybody else is saying or thinking or feeling, then you can never get anything done, because there's always going to be somebody, a large number of somebodies, who are going to dislike it. And every great idea comes from an innovator. And innovators are people who do things differently. They're not trying to please everybody else. Because when you think about it, if you try to please everyone else, if you try to be just like everyone else, what do you have to offer? If you're just like everyone else, you just have sameness to offer. It's your uniqueness. After a while, you begin to say that's just okay. And in fact, even in my own relationship with my wife, if we have disagreements now, there was a time if she would disagree with something that I would believe, I would be upset about that. Not immobilized or anything, but like, how could you not agree with who? Now, if we talk and she disagrees with an, I just say, that's her. That's who she is. That's what she believes. And she doesn't understand me, and that's okay. The greatest understanding you can have, if you want to be enlightened, is that no one will ever understand you, because you're unique. You are a unique creation, and no one can ever get behind your eyeballs and see things as you do. You are always alone with who you are, and yet never lonely if you like the person you're alone with. So those risks stop being risks after a while. They're only risks to people who are just starting out on the path, who are just beginning to find out how easy all of this is and how perfect it all is. And the further along you go, the less risk there is. It just doesn't matter anymore, whether you fail or whether somebody doesn't like it or whether or not it fits in. Those things just don't matter anymore. And they become less and less and less risky, and just easier and easier and easier to just be what you know you have